we're going to spend the next 15, maybe 20, maybe even 25 minutes looking back over some of his great fights, Spencer Oliver and myself. We're going to start in 2005, even though up to that point he'd won the British title and then he won the WBA, the World Boxing Union title. It's not really around anymore, but defended it 15 times. There were some great fights. Ray Oliveira, Ben Taki. He fought John Thaxton for the British title, Eamon McGee as well. There were really good fights where he learnt a lot about himself to fight through an early knockdown, fight through a bad cut over the left eye with John Thaxton. Great corner work by Mick Williamson that day. Loads of stuff that we remember. I was at his debut, Spence, in Widnes in 1997. He was an 18-year-old. Frank Warren said, "You've got to come and watch this kid." Kingsway Leisure Centre. And he was focused, he was handsome. He was the 10-stone king, the Mexican Mancunian, the hitman. And but we're going to go to 2005 first of all, winning his first considered world title. He beat Kostya Tszyu, the long-reigning IBF light welterweight champion, in Manchester. Kostya Tszyu retired on his stool after the 11th round. It was a huge upset, and the night Hatton became a star. The atmosphere in there that night was off the charts.
Yeah, it certainly was. I think that it was the crowning night for Ricky Hatton, and, you know, his most memorable night, I'm sure. Kostya Tszyu was a huge favourite going into that fight, a pound-for-pound star at the time. I picked Frank Bruno up on the way up there, actually, and me and Frank were talking about what a great little fighter Ricky Hatton was, but this opportunity may have come too soon against a formidable champion. And Hatton went in there, he got hurt early in the fight, and he bit down on his gum shield, and he kicked on, and he pushed it, and he broke Kostya Tszyu's soul. He stole his heart that night, and it was a memorable victory. What a night. It went on at 2 a.m. there, I remember, to suit TV times, and you could imagine 20,000 Mancunians there, all behind Ricky Hatton, and what a night. What a memorable night that was. Best night of boxing I've ever been at.
Yeah, I think it's one of the great nights of British boxing in our lifetime, no question about it, and Ricky created that. Mickey Vann, the referee that night, he let Ricky run riot in the ring as well. From there, Ricky was a national sports star at that point. He had done what people thought was unthinkable, beating Kostya Tszyu, the Siberian naturalised in Australia, arguably in the top 5 pound for pound, as I say. Some people argue was top 3. Brilliant matchmaking by Frank Warren. And then he went on to unify at light welterweight that year against Carlos Mauser, a very dangerous puncher, to add the WBA belt to his IBF crown, cementing himself as the world's best at 10 stone.
Yeah, he certainly did. Mauser was known as a good champion, then the WBA champion, and Ricky Hatton went out there. He took the fight to him, swishing those attacks to body and head, and he won that fight in the 9th round, a 9th round KO up in Sheffield. What another memorable night again. Ricky Hatton fight nights were formidable, phenomenal to be at. The atmosphere was absolutely electrifying, and when he beat Mauser, what a performance that was.
Yeah, and then ambitiously, and I think he was under Dennis Hobson now and not Frank Warren, he goes on a journey in America. He starts to conquer America. He fights Luis Calazzo up at 147 pounds, a very wizened, clever fighter, steps up to welterweight to fight for the WBA title. He survived a tough final round in a very close fight with Calazzo and won on points.
Yep, very tough night for him there, moving up to welterweight. You could see the size difference. Calazzo was a big fighter, and, you know,
look at his face afterwards as well.
Yeah, it was a tough night. He had to grit and push through in the Thomas Mack Centre. It was packed out there, and a load of Mancunians travelled over to support Ricky Hatton that night. But that will go down as one of his hardest nights. I think Calazzo was a very tricky southpaw, and Ricky was struggling to work him out. But he done what champions do, and he found a way.
So from the TD Garden in Boston, another big step when he goes to the Paris Casino, Paradise, Nevada, basically the Strip. Juan Urango, this was a great night for him, but then he beats Juan Urango, who was a little Mike Tyson type figure. He was a tough fight as well.
Tough guy.
But then he stepped up, and we're just seeing the pictures here. There's Jose Luis Castillo, who had a tremendous pair of fights with Floyd Mayweather. Some people thought he beat him. And Ricky Hatton stopped him with the perfect liver punch. And that night, Wayne Rooney in the Thomas and Mack Centre, I remember it well because we spoke to Wayne Rooney afterwards. Wayne Rooney carried one of the belts, and Liam and Noel Gallagher have since said they argued over who was going to carry the belt.
Yep.
The Oasis twins, if you like, the Leeds guys from Oasis were all there on his walkout, and it was an amazing night at the Thomas and Mack.
He dominated that fight against Luis Castillo, a fight that was meant to be much harder for Ricky Hatton on paper for sure. And the first fight Castillo had with Floyd Mayweather, I thought he actually won that fight. Yep. He out-hustled Mayweather. Mayweather beat him in the return in another close fight as well. But Ricky Hatton went out there, dominated from the opening bell, and that left hook, trademark left hook that he threw to the body, absolutely folded Castillo like a deck chair. He went over, he was screaming, he was never going to beat the count. What a
fourth
win
round.
That was.
Yeah, fourth round, it was all over.
Yeah, brilliant performance.
It was, and I just remember celebrating. That was one of the first nights where I remember, I think we all ended up at 9 Fine Irishmen at New York, and that was the beginning of the fans having a celebratory Guinness or two with Ricky, where he never had security. He had Paul Speak and maybe one bigger man looking after him, but he would be there in a sea of fans with everybody just celebrating and enjoying till the wee hours, just singing and chanting.
That's why everybody loved Ricky Hatton. Like the night going back to Costa Zoo, you go, there's 20,000 Mancunians in there, and every single one of them had probably had a pint with Ricky Hatton or felt like they'd had a pint with him because he was the kid next door. That was what made him such an attraction. Not just that he was electrifying in the ring, but the guy was such a personality out of it, and he had time for every single person.
The big thing that happened after the Jose Luis Castillo fight, as Spencer was just explaining, there was this feeling, there was this relationship that people felt about Castillo and Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather was looking for more opponents. He was undefeated. I think Ricky was, undefeated in 43 after that. Mm-hmm. And it had gone quickly. He was 6 years into his career. He was in his prime. I think he was about 26, 27 at the time. And we're going to go to break right now. And when we come back, we're going to do the tail end of Ricky's career, when he really was a crossover star here, but maybe an even bigger star in the United States. Ricky Hatton coming up again next. We are up to 2007, when finally he signs to fight Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather comes here on a media tour. He wears a Manchester United shirt at the press conference. Obviously, Ricky was the Blue Moon man, a dyed-in-the-wool Manchester City fan who'd been going and having his Bovril since he was 7 or 8. His dad played in the reserves, of course. There they are, look, nose to nose, Joe Cortez between them. In the actual fight. It was a spectacular week. I remember being told off by Colin Hart, the late, great Colin Hart, for backing and supporting that Ricky would win the fight and being caught up in it, when I knew I voted with my heart, and I stopped doing that night because my head said Mayweather would win, but my heart said Ricky would win. He could pull it off. It was an incredible event. They drank the bars dry, the 25, 30, 35,000, whatever it was that travelled over. 30,000 that travelled over there. I think there might have even been more. I remember every jet that travelled to America for days after days after days was just full of boxing fans. I remember going over early, and it was just full of boxing fans.
British fans took over the weigh-in. You heard them chanting, "There's only one Ricky Hatton." Mayweather couldn't believe it himself.
He loved it.
Yeah, absolutely, he loved it. But I said he couldn't believe the support that this man had got Ricky Hatton. He went out there, and Joe Cortez, the referee, didn't do Hatton any favours in that fight, by the way. Every time they got close, where Hatton was at his most dangerous, Cortez broke them up, and it was always going to be a tough night for Ricky Hatton before eventually getting knocked out in that 10th round. But again, what a performance he put up against the pound-for-pound #1 in the world, and an all-time great in Floyd Mayweather.
Indeed, and Ricky was knocked out by a check hook in the ninth, wasn't it? 10th round. 10th round, but he put up a tremendous battle. I remember sitting with Ricky, I think it was 2018, 19, maybe 20, in his gym in Hyde, where we did a programme for DAZN. I filmed with him for the day. And that was the day I'd put the body bag on. He doubled me up with a left hook to the body as well, to much merriment. But we watched the whole Mayweather fight back. And he he was so irked, and he was going, Joe Cortez again, Joe Cortez again. And you know what? Mayweather got away. When we looked back on it, Mayweather got away with a lot of elbows and forearms that night as well. It was a rough fight.
It was a rough fight, but like I say, that Cortez was heavily in favour of the American.
I completely agree with you.
Mayweather, and it was always going to be tough for Ricky because Ricky was good when he was inside, up close.
Yeah.
He would step round the side and that trademark left hook to the body, doubling up to the head. Yeah. He never got off with his shots because Cortez never allowed him to get off.
Ricky was fighting two men in there that
Absolutely.
night. But it was still a great occasion. You can see Carol, his mum, and Ray, his father, in there. Carol used to have a vodka in a little water bottle to calm her nerves ringside. They were great. The family came as a unit. Matthew was always there. The wives were there. ABC4 with the carpet stall that Carol used to run at Glossop Market, where she'd be, go on, Ray, cut the carpet over there, move that over there. And Ricky's a crap carpet fitter, you know. And as his dad always used to say, it's a good job he could box, because he was terrible at carpet fitting.
Absolutely.
They were just so much fun, and they were great characters in British life. He took the loss very badly.
This was the beginning of the problems, I believe, for Ricky Hatton. You know, that loss was very difficult. Going into that fight, was he 42-0, 43-0?
43-0.
Going into that one, and he'd been sort of like going through everyone, and this was the big chance for him. He'd boxed over in America on a number of occasions, built a big name and a big fan base over there for himself as well, but he was going to get the opportunity against Mayweather, and I think that he took that loss badly because of the refereeing in that one. You know, Cortez never allowed him to get off his shots, and he feels a little bit hard done by him. Probably felt he could have done better in that one. Whether he could have won or not
he always says that himself. He says that himself, that when I did that program with him, it's out there on DAZN. So if you look it up, it's Ricky Hatton looking back on the Floyd Mayweather fight, and we went through every single round. And you know, the little lad from Hattersley, as he called himself, from the Hattersley Council estate, he does say, look at Joe doing that, but he also says, who knows?
Yeah.
You know, he knew and knows how great Floyd was.
I had that conversation with him myself on many occasions. He said, listen, Spence, this is what it is. Look, if I was given the opportunity and I was defeated, you know, and I was defeated after giving it everything, then I would accept it. But it's always going to niggle at me. It's always going to be in the back of my mind. And that's why I say that was the sort of the beginning of the problems really for Ricky, because he feels that he was hard done by in that fight. And like he said he didn't know if he would have won the fight. He might have got beaten anyway, but let him have a go. Let him have his shot, and he feels hard done by.
So at this point, he's fought. This guy was the number one pound for pound at the time, in my view. He was recognised more and more over the coming years that Floyd Mayweather was the number one pound for pound of the era. Obviously, multiple weight world champion, undefeated in 50 fights in his career. But 6 months later, I think it was 6 months later, and it's not in our list here, so we've got no footage of it, no pictures. But we go to Manchester City Stadium. He makes his comeback against Juan Lascano. He's a bit ropey in the fight, but he comes out, I think it was in the Fat Man suit that night, the Ricky Hatton. It was an extraordinary walkout through the blue moon out onto the stage. The atmosphere, 58,000 people there. It was a fairly new stadium at the time.
Yeah,
you know, City Stadium. It was new. Oh, there he goes. There he is. There he is in the Fatton suit. He knew how to celebrate, to entertain a crowd. He knew how to deliver. He was also so self-effacing. He pushed himself back into, look at him in the fat suit.
Yeah, but do you know what? He took a lot of stick for ballooning up between fights.
3-4 stone.
He didn't just put on a stone like most fighters would. It was like you say, 3 and 4, and he would get really fat. And he sort of took it upon himself to come out in that big fat man suit, if you like. And it was brilliant because he had Fatton written on the back of it, and it was just like, I thought that was genius, him doing that. He was saying, listen, this is what it is. And he went out there and he put on a great performance.
He did.
And got back to winning ways.
Paulie Malignaggi had his dreadlocks cut during that event when he was fighting. I think it was Love More Nadu on that card as well. He had his hair cut in the 5th round after the 4th or 5th round. But then Ricky went on to fight Malignaggi in his next fight back at the MGM in Las Vegas, dominating Malignaggi before the fight was stopped in the 11th. There he is, as Malignaggi, with no hair this time. And he's had some lovely things to say this week. We got 4 or 5 more minutes to finish off these last 3 fights that we're talking about. He was back. What we felt was towards his best in that fight. He looked good, he performed well, and he dominated Malignaggi. Look at his, there was the Oasis boys again.
Yeah, but he got back to winning ways with that Collazo fight, and he needed that just for a bit of self-esteem, if you like, and he got there. Then he goes in against Malignaggi, who was a proven tricky customer, a brilliant, he utilised the ring so well, used the space so well, and it was always going to be a tough night for Ricky, because Ricky, with fighters that didn't want to stand there and trade with him, he would find it difficult, but against Malignaggi, he pinned him down before stopping him in the 11th round. Brilliant performance.
Two more fights before we go to break. We'll go through the Manny Pacquiao fight next. Manny Pacquiao was one of the greats at the time. Ricky, I went out 4 weeks in advance for this, and I've been to camp with Manny Pacquiao in Los Angeles at the Wildcard Gym with Freddie Roach, and he looked unbelievable. I went to Vegas, and that was the first time I met Kugan Cassius of IFL TV, by the way. Mm-hmm. He was Ricky's security guy.
Yes.
And he was with Paul Speak, his ever-present manager, who's absolutely broken at the moment, who we're both in touch with at the moment, who will release details on what's going to happen with Ricky over the next few days and weeks, and we'll keep everyone abreast of that if we are going to do a march for him. But the Manny Pacquiao fight, again, he was like a statue in that fight, if I can describe it like that. He got battered.
Yeah, but I think it's fair to say by the time he stepped into the ring with Manny Pacquiao, and I think that Ricky himself said this, he said, the cracks had appeared by then.
He'd overtrained, he'd stayed out there too long, because I ran into him 2 weeks before the fight.
I think a lot of the fight had sort of left him by this stage as well, though.
But he looked sullen, he didn't look happy, he didn't look like he'd had a great camp.
Fighters always get to the stage where they're the first ones to know that it's gone, but the last ones to admit it. And I think Ricky was at that stage of his career, and he's still wanting to test himself, but I think he knew then that the best Ricky Hatton days were behind him.
When he lost that fight, it's the first time, the only time, and some of the journalists moaned, but I didn't at the time. He didn't turn up for our next morning interview, and he always came and regaled us with stories, gave us wonderful copy. He did all his career, like when the iguana was crawling on the back of the sofa in the hat factory, a converted hat factory with Billy Graham, the heat of the hat factory, and a boiling office the size of this studio with a blooming iguana 2 foot long crawling past you all the time. It was really weird. Everything was a story. Everything.
Do you know what? I come across a beautiful photo the other day going through all our Ricky Hatton stuff, as we all were, and I was in that hat factory, and I was there with Ricky Hatton, his brother Matthew, Glenn McCrory, and we had this photo, and Anthony Farnell was in the photo as well, and Ricky looked so young and so fresh, and it just brought all these memories back, as you've been doing as well, Gareth. We're going through all our stuff so we go way back to right to the beginning, right back to the ABAs with Ricky Hatton. So it was it's been an emotional time for sure.
He came back in 2012. That was 2009. He came back in 2012 against Vyacheslav Senchenko in Manchester. And despite losing by KO, body shot, I think it was, in the 9th round, the night was remembered for the incredible support he received, showing the bond he had with fans. And before we go to break, what I remember distinctly, sitting very closely with him in a packed gallery at the press conference afterwards, and I remember him saying one of the first things was, "I haven't got it anymore."
Yep. That's what I said. The first ones to know it, but the last ones to admit it. And I think that was the night. He lost to Senchenko. Let's have it right. Let's have it right here. This guy would not have been fit to tie his bootlaces in his day. Senchenko, no disrespect to him. He went out there and got the job done, but it was a shell of the former Ricky Hatton that we all knew. And that night, thankfully, Ricky admitted it was over, because I didn't want to see him continue after that.
Ricky Hatton, R.I.P.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app, and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.